Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Debrief on ABC News Live. I'm Kimberly Brooks. Thanks so much for joining us. It's the final day for the Supreme Court to make those decisions before they go on summer break. So we have the latest there. And of course, we're recapping last night's first Democratic presidential candidate debate. And we'll tell you everything that you need to know. But first, here are your headlines.
At least one person is dead and several others injured in a pair of bombing attacks in the capital of Tunisia. One of the bombs going off near the French embassy. More worries around Iran today, the day Iran is expected to surpass the limits on enriched uranium set by the 2015 nuclear deal.
New problems have been found with Boeing's grounded 737 MAX jets. Problem coming up during testing for the fix to an anti-stall system.
Harrowing surveillance video shows a teenager catching a toddler after she fell from a building in Istanbul. The 17-year-old says he was walking nearby when he saw the 2-year-old girl was hanging from the window, so he walked underneath and grabbed her right before she hit the ground. You can see terror on his face as she falls from a second-story window. The toddler's father thanked him for saving his daughter's life. Everyone walked away uninjured.
Soccer superstar Rapinoe has been steamrolling opponents during the World Cup. But should the U.S. women win it all like they did 4 years ago, team co-captain Rapinoe says she won't return to the White House for any ceremony.
Are you excited about going to the White House?
I'm not going to the White House. No, I'm not going to the White House. We're not going to be invited.
Rapinoe, who is openly gay, has described herself as a walking protest when it comes to the Trump administration. But her latest comment quickly got the president's attention. President Trump going after Rapinoe on Twitter, tweeting, "I am a big fan of the American team and women's soccer, but Meghan should win first before she talks. Finish the job. We haven't yet invited Meghan or the team, but I am now inviting the team, win or lose."
We begin with breaking news at the Supreme Court. It's the final day for major decisions before a long summer break. And Terry Moran is right there with the latest. Terry, a decision on the census and gerrymandering today, right?
That's right, the census case, Kimberly, that's the big one. And the bottom line, the 2020 census cannot go forward at this time with a citizenship question on it. Remember, the Trump administration wanted to ask every person in America, are you a citizen of the United States? Census Bureau experts said that will distort the count. A lot of people won't want to answer that question. The Trump administration said they needed to ask the question in order to improve enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. Well, in this opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts, joining the 4 liberals on the court, says that's a contrived explanation. He hammers the Trump administration's explanation, saying that the judiciary can't just be naive, and that when you do something as the Commerce Department, the Census Bureau, you have to have a reasonable explanation. He goes on to say that's not an explanation, the Voting Rights Act rationale, that's a distraction. And so he says this case must go back down to see if there is a legally permissible reason that's also the truth about why the Trump administration wants to ask that question. Now, this all comes amid turmoil. There have been records that have been unearthed showing a major Republican donor tried to get this citizenship question onto the census, talked to Wilbur Ross about it in order to increase Republican political power and decrease the power of minorities. If that gets surfaced in the district court, the census is up for grabs because they've got to start printing those census forms next week. So Chief Justice John Roberts essentially saying, don't try to BS this court, if you will. Don't lie to this court. Don't use this court for your political purposes. If you want to do something, tell it to me straight, and I'll decide on that basis. He did not join the liberals, who wanted to say a citizenship question is never constitutional. He said, just don't lie to me about it.
Yeah, that one was no doubt causing controversy. So what do we know on the gerrymandering case?
Well, that was also Chief Justice Roberts' opinion. And once again, he didn't want the court used by by the political parties. That was a case out of both North Carolina and Maryland in which the state legislatures, one Republican, the other Democrat, had gerrymandered those district lines in ridiculous ways. Roberts admits in that opinion, these are ridiculously partisan line drawing exercises. But he says there's no way that this court can get involved in that political fight by law. He says it's the job of the court to say what the law is. And sometimes that means the court says there's no law. This is a political fight. You guys figure it out by appointing independent commissions. Maybe Congress can step in, but there's no way the court can fix the problem of political gerrymandering. He essentially keeps the court out of that political fight as well. So you see a theme. It's a kind of declaration of judicial independence in a time of furious political division. Chief Justice John Roberts, in these two opinions, says, I won't be part of it, and neither will this court if I have anything to do with that.
And Terry, I just have to ask you, when these decisions come out, people are always looking for the running of the interns. Were you able to see that today?
Oh, yeah, no question about it. And we had like championship runner. There was no question about it. We got these. Look at this. I mean, it's baking hot out here. This plaza operates as a kind of pizza oven effect when the sun slams down on it, but that did not dissuade us. We've got the opinions.
You've got the opinions. Thank you so much, Terry, for the updates. We appreciate it.
You bet.
All right, guys, and we move on to the 2020 race. A big night in Miami as the first Democratic presidential candidate debate kicked off. 10 candidates trying to break out from a crowded field to show who is best positioned to defeat President Trump. And our Lana Zach was right there last night, and she joins us now. Lana, lots of Spanish last night. What were the highlights in your opinion?
Yeah, you're right, Kimberly. A lot of Spanish. At least 3 people on that stage in that crowd of 10 spoke Spanish at some point during the evening. And actually, the internet had quite a bit of fun, really, with the way that Cory Booker looked at Beto O'Rourke when he first busted out the Spanish. The internet also having a lot of fun at O'Rourke's expense, saying he managed to speak in 2 different languages, but answer questions in neither of them. But for me, I think that my highlights, having been a former high school debater and really into it, was the good zingers that came off. Amy Klobuchar, when she took on Governor Inslee, saying when he was touting his record as the only person on the stage who had actually done something to guarantee women their reproductive rights, she kind of looked at him and took him down a notch, saying, there are 3 women on this stage, and I think we actually have done quite a bit for women. The other really good zinger that came off, I think, was by Tulsi Gabbard. Actually, she became the most Googled candidate over the course of the debate last night, and she really took on. She took on. You know what? I've been up since that debate last night, so I'm trying to remember.
It was a late night. I totally get it.
It was a late night, but she really was able to tout her record serving in Afghanistan, and I think that's part of the reason why she became the #1 most Googled candidate. There was also a lot of sparring that happened between Julian Castro and Cory Booker over immigration, but I don't know that either of that really elevated one of those candidates over the other.
And so, I think healthcare, immigration, as you said, definitely dominated the conversation. What do you think we can look forward to tonight? 10 different candidates. What should we be expecting?
10 more candidates. I'm going to be really interested in seeing how they try to differentiate themselves from the candidates that debated in that first night. One of the major differences is obviously going to be Biden right there at the center of it all. He wasn't named not once in the entirety of last night's debate. I don't think that Bernie Sanders is going to let that one slide tonight, Kimberly.
All right, Lana Zach covering it for us right there in Miami. Thank you so much. And guys, we have a number of campaign reporters covering these candidates across the country, but I want to bring in Molly Nagel, who's also in Miami, and we have Armando Garcia in Homestead, Florida. Armando, I'll start with you. Lots of the candidates are touring these migrant facilities near Miami after Elizabeth Warren did it yesterday. What do we know about that?
Kimberly, I am right in front of the Homestead Detention Center for Migrant Children, separated at the border. This has become sort of the epicenter of this conversation about family separation. Why? Well, over the past few days, several candidates have stopped by here on the campaign trail, and over the next couple days, several more are expected to come. Now, just a few moments ago, Senator Bernie Sanders touring the outside of the facility, saying it's shameful that these children are locked up behind those fences. Senator Bernie Sanders, joined by his wife, the Senator senator said that in the United States, we should not be detaining 8, 9, 10-year-olds in these facilities. Now, also calling out the private prison industry, as he has on the campaign trail, and as many of these facilities are run privately and bankrolled by these major banks. Now, since last year, 7 children who have been in custody in these places have died. Mayor Bill de Blasio also here earlier today saying it's shameful and noting that this looks like a prison. Now, later tonight, 10 candidates are going to be up on that debate stage as they lay out their plan for immigration reform. It's certainly going to be a main topic. They're going to be talking about family separation, and also they're going to be talking about the decriminalization of border crossings. Some candidates like Julian Castro have called for the decriminalization of these border crossings from a criminal offense to a civil offense. Kimberly?
All right, we appreciate that, Armando. And Molly, as Lana said, we did not hear the name Biden at all last night, but how is he preparing for his evening right now?
Well, Joe Biden's advisors tell me he is thoroughly prepared for the debate this evening. He's been preparing in Wilmington, Delaware, alongside several advisors, all of whom have been, kind of in these marathon advising sessions. Biden advisors say that they've been preparing with mock debate formats. They haven't given too much away about how exactly they're preparing for these debates. They say they have 11 more of these to go, so they don't want to let the cat out of the bag. But you heard Lana talk about Bernie Sanders, and he's previewed his debate approach that he is going to go after the former vice president on areas where they have differences in policy. Biden's campaign, when I asked them how the vice president was preparing to handle these types of attacks, Biden's campaign told me that if Bernie Sanders wants to spend his time on the stage tonight talking about Joe Biden, that's a decision for him to make. But Vice President Biden is going to be focusing on his record. He's been studying his past record. He's going to focus on the ideas he wants to present to the American people this evening.
All right, we have Molly Nagel right there in Miami and Armando Garcia in Homestead. Thank you guys so much. And guys, make sure you keep it right here on ABC News Live for your debate coverage. It's going to be starting tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern. We've been keeping you updated on the major humanitarian crisis at the border and the status of over 300 migrant children being housed in unsanitary detention centers. Well, yesterday, hours before immigration advocates asked a federal judge to issue an emergency order for immediate inspection and access to doctors, U.S. officials actually opened the building in Clinton, Texas, to journalists, and Matt Gutman was there. So, Matt, I think it's the question that everyone wants to know is, what did you see when you went inside?
We basically saw what is laid out like a jail situation. And in fact, the man who operates this facility basically said it looks and operates like a small town jail. Now, there is a central pod, and radiating outward are cells. Now, apparently the cell doors are unlocked. Kids can come and go as they please. But, it's very jarring, Kimberly, to see kids as young as toddlers inside these cells, their faces pressed against the glass, looking out on the journalists as we toured this facility. They showed us all the food that they had inside. It's the same menu every day: a packet of oatmeal for breakfast, cup of noodle soup for lunch, and a burrito about this big for dinner, beef or bean burrito. So total caloric intake of definitely less than 1,000 calories a day. But when we went in there, and you can kind of see where it is, you can see those Border Patrol trucks behind us, and it's in the back of this facility over here. But when we went in, the population was about 117. Capacity is 106. It was designed to accommodate 100 people or so for 8 to 12 hours. But these kids have been here on average for 6 to 10 days. And as you mentioned, it has been as high as 300. In fact, officials told us it peaked at 700 at one point, which is an unimaginably large number of children all packed together in this one place. And that's when you can imagine illness and filth and children taking care of children, as described by the lawyers in that restraining order you mentioned. So we probably saw it at the best of the best, and it is still an incredibly miserable place to be if you are a child in a new country and scared and essentially locked up in a facility like this.
Right. So, Matt, one thing that I think is interesting is when the journalist came in, you were able to tour the facility, but you couldn't talk to the children, and the monitors that went into the facility could talk to the children but not tour the facility. So why do you think there was that separation?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, it's kind of like a catch-22, right? We're allowed, so we're prohibited from actually filming inside or speaking with any of the children, but we're allowed to see it. And the monitors are allowed only to talk to the children and not to see anything. I mean, that is part of the law. Customs and Border Protection could certainly allow those monitors inside to view the conditions and inspect them. And that's, in fact, one of the things that this restraining order is demanding, to have independent doctors and monitors inside to be able to see what's really going on. You know, I didn't see anything that was outwardly appalling more than one would expect of children essentially being locked in a jail, right? I mean, the conditions are miserable. We didn't see any outright abuse, so why try to hide it? And it certainly seems that to some degree, Customs and Border Protection is trying to hide something. They say that they're just protecting the privacy of their officers and the children who are minors. But in the past, they have allowed cameras into facilities that are just like this one. So I don't exactly know what's going on, but I can promise you we're going to keep asking these officials the questions of why we can't get in there and why we can't film inside and talk to those kids, Kimberly.
Absolutely. And Matt, we appreciate your updates right there in Clinton, Texas. Thanks for joining us. And guys, we move on to the president. He's overseas in Asia in what could be his most consequential trip of the year. First, Japan for the G-20 summit, then South Korea to discuss North Korea's nuclear program. So Karen Travers is in Osaka with more. Karen?
Hi, Kimberly. President Trump is attending a very critical high-stakes world leader summit here in Japan. But as he made his way over here, he clearly had on his mind politics back at home. At a refueling stop in Alaska, the president weighed in on the Democratic presidential candidates debate that was taking place on Wednesday in Miami.
I think they're all going to do very poorly.
The president also seemed to be thinking about that debate while flying on board Air Force One. The president tweeted just one word, writing, quote, boring, seemingly a reference to that debate. Here in Osaka, the president will meet with 9 world leaders on the sidelines of the G-20 summit, including Russian President Vladimir Putin. The president's previous meetings with Putin have sparked controversy, either for something the president said during or after the meeting, or for what was not revealed, what was kept secret by the White House. The president on Wednesday, before leaving the White House, was asked if he would tell Vladimir Putin that Russia cannot interfere in U.S. elections. Here's what he had to say.
I'll have a very good conversation with him. What I say to him is none of your business.
And with trade talks between the U.S. and China at another standstill, the president's meeting with China's President Xi Jinping is going to be very closely watched. Kimberly, the president says he is still eager to make a deal, but he's also still threatening another round of tariffs, up to 25% on $300 billion of Chinese goods. The president says he won't make a decision on that until after this meeting with Xi. It is a very, very critical meeting. Global investors will be paying a lot of attention. Kimberly?
All right. Thank you, Karen, for the updates. And guys, we move on to baseball and the ongoing debate over the stadium netting so fans don't get injured. Remember the 2-year-old young Astros fan who was hit by a foul ball in a game last month? Absolutely devastating and emotional to watch. And now we know that the injury was far worse than anyone could ever guess. So I'm joined by Paula Ferris with more. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. I want to ask you, what is the damage and injury to this 2-year-old?
Right. Well, you can tell an adult to put their phone down and their hot dog down and their nachos down and to pay attention to the game. But what do you tell a 2-year-old? This 2-year-old suffered severe head injuries, a skull fracture. Wow. She had a seizure in the hospital, and she was hospitalized for several days. She's going to be reevaluated in July, but in the meantime, she's on an anti-seizure medication. She and her family, they were sitting just outside of the protective netting, because the protective netting right now in most ballparks goes from right behind home plate just to the outside of the dugout. Her family was just about 10 feet outside of that. So we are pulling for her.
Absolutely. And I remember after this happened, we had ESPN's Jeff Passan on, and he was just making the case that the teams have to do something or it's going to happen to someone else. Someone could die.
Yeah.
And just this week, another woman was actually hit at a Dodgers game.
Right, and someone did die last year. So earlier this week, we saw a woman get hit by a line drive, a foul ball at a Dodgers game. She was hospitalized. She's recovered. But last year, an elderly woman died at after getting hit by a foul ball. The ball actually went over the netting in that situation, and she died from her subsequent injuries. And right now, Major League Baseball's stance and policy is that you have to have netting from behind the home plate to the dugout. Beyond that, it's up to the stadiums and it's up to the teams. So far, we saw the Dodgers, in reaction to this woman who got hit last week, they have decided to extend the netting. The Chicago White Sox, they're taking the largest steps. They're going to extend the netting all the way to the foul poles in the outfield. The Washington Nationals are doing so as well. And
so finally,
but that's only 3 of the 30 Major League Baseball teams. The players really want this too. They want a safe environment.
What is the delay?
Yeah, well, it's really up. It's up to each stadium and it's up to each team, but you have to imagine there's going to be a lot more pressure on Major League Baseball. And I bet the Major League Baseball Players Association is going to start putting pressure on MLB as well.
Can the fans sue the teams when this happens?
They've tried, but there's something that's called the baseball rule, which means essentially, Kimberly, that you assume the risk and liability of getting injured. If you've ever gone to a baseball game, there are signs everywhere. Beware of flying baseballs and flying bats. It's even on the fine print of your ticket. Turn your ticket around and read it, and it says that you, as the consumer, and as the fan, assume the liability if you go to a baseball game. We have seen in the past injury lawsuits being filed, but they don't really go anywhere because of the plethora of warnings. In this particular situation, the case of this little girl, this 2-year-old, their family has hired a prominent attorney. We don't know if they're going to proceed with any sort of injury lawsuit. That's to be determined, but what that lawyer is pushing for, he's pushing the Astros to extend the netting.
Wow. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and heart still breaks for the little girl, but I'm just happy that she's alive.
She's alive. Yeah. Again, she's going to be reassessed next month. She remains on that anti-seizure medication we're all pulling for. Reminder, we all have to pay attention when we go to baseball games, but this is a 2-year-old we're talking about.
I think I'm going to watch at home, Paula.
Yeah. Extend the netting, and then we really don't have to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you, too.
You have a human in the studio.
Yes, right? So, guys, we move on to some good news. As you know, we've been covering Pride all month, and this is Pride Week. It's full of parades and celebrations and reflection and education. And we're highlighting people who are making a difference in the community. And, of course, this is all about the LGBT community, where we want equality and human rights, and we want people to just enjoy the love and the humanity. And as I said, we're highlighting people who are making a big difference in this community. And one of those people is Charles Leslie, who is the co-founder and director emeritus of the Leslie Lohman Museum of Gay and Lesbian Art. And he joins me now. How you doing, Charles?
Very well, thank you.
It's good to see you. You are literally an icon of Soho's queer art scene.
They tell me.
I think that's appropriate to say, yes?
Well, that's what they tell me, so I have to believe them.
Yeah, so before your museum was what it is now, it had to be underground, you know?
Definitively.
Yes, why? Tell us why.
Well, I mean, the idea of showing anything that involved gay life was generally frowned on years ago, and not that many years ago. And so my partner and I, my late partner of 48 years, Fritz Lohman, and I decided that there should be a place for art that was usually excluded from mainline venues. So we put on a show, a la Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney.
Yeah.
And it was so successful that we did it again a second year. And that led to the creation of a foundation, a nonprofit foundation, the Leslie Lohman Gay Art Foundation. And in the beginning, there was a lot of erotica, but it very quickly expanded to include romantic work, sociological work, political work, and a lot more work by lesbian artists.
Yes.
And finally, our accountant said, "You're carrying this thing on your back." That's why we turned it into a foundation. And we had a wonderful lawyer named Erika Bell, who finally talked the federal authorities in charge of that sort of thing into granting us that status. Because in the beginning they were very strange. They'd ask questions like, well, where is this so-called collection? In someone's bathroom, you know.
Right.
So anyway, we finally convinced them, Erika Bell, she finally convinced them that it was a real enterprise and a real collection. We now have over 30,000 pieces in the permanent collection of the museum.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Why do you think it's so important for the LGBTQ community to be represented through art?
Well, throughout history, people everywhere have been able to see themselves in manifestations of art. And up until really the 20th century, gay people and lesbians and trans people could never see themselves depicted clearly in that respect, and it's a kind of empowerment when you can actually see yourself in a work of art.
Absolutely. Your current exhibit is called Art After Stonewall.
Yes.
I love how you're sort of demarcating that. It's like before Stonewall, after Stonewall. So what does the after look like?
Well, for one thing, it becomes much freer. Before Stonewall, there was no gay art visible except even the few gay superstars which emerged, now many more have, but their work was very circumscribed. It's only recently that Andy Warhol's entire oeuvre has been shown in museums, because part of it you couldn't see in the past.
Wow.
But after Stonewall, things did change. Not immediately. It took some time, but now we have 4 erotic Andy Warhol pieces in a traveling show, and they're going all over the country.
That's amazing. And I just want you to tell people how old you are, because you're incredible. All the work you've been doing for nearly your entire life. How old are you?
86.
86.
Yeah.
Fabulous. And you're going to be at the parade this weekend, yes?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Yes. Well, we're going to look for you there, so we appreciate you being there, being here. Charles, you're fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Guys, and we move on to Minnesota, where a lead pastor may be defrocked and evicted from his church because he supports his LGBT community. The church is also home to a homeless shelter, a child care center, and a number of social justice projects. If evicted, it would be the first time in the 130-year history of the evangelical church that a minister has been forced out. So we're joined by him now, Pastor Dan Collison of the First Covenant Church. Pastor Dan, I just have to ask you, you know, how is this impacting you? How has this affected you and your congregation?
Well, it's affected us deeply. We are pleased to be a historic congregation in the Evangelical Covenant denomination. We've been around for almost 145 years in downtown Minneapolis. And 10 years ago, this community of faith went through a very significant revitalization process that included welcoming and including the LGBTQ community, both in our community and in equal standing on our staff and on the leadership and with pastoral care. And so it has impacted us greatly. This denomination, which this church, our church, helped found 134 years ago, is in a community of churches that up until this point has been given permission to have pastors and churches disagree on virtually everything you can imagine. On the essentials, we agree. On secondary matters, we give freedom in every case. And until this moment, and until the vote that's going to take place today and tomorrow, this denomination may be changing how they do business and how they form and what they consider important.
And how are you preparing yourself for the outcome? Because right now you have no idea which way it's going to go.
That's correct. This afternoon between 3 and 5 p.m., I will go in front of 600 to 700 ordained pastors, and I will make a case for why I feel I should not be dismissed, and they will vote. This will all happen within an hour. And then tomorrow, our church will face a similar sort of experience with the full delegation in Omaha, Nebraska. We're staying downtown Omaha, and we are going to all have these votes in the next 2 days. The church, I want to be very clear, First Covenant Church has been a generous church. church, we've sought to have freedom for many years. We've sought to open the dialogue. We have been frustrated that the denominational leaders have not chosen to include openly gay individuals with diverse opinions about their policies to actually be in forums, to be a part of conversations. And obviously, this does all circle around the policy. And so our church and myself, as a part of our church, will continue on, even if we are thrown out in the next 2 days. But that's not our desire. Our desire is to let the covenant actually stay together, learn more about this topic, and learn more about the beautiful lives of those who are lesbian and gay and transgender and bisexual and all of the other things we're learning about human identity. So this is a very important moment. We're grounded in it. We're sad that we're at this point of having to vote, but we're willing to face it and have this conversation in front of a watching world.
All right, Pastor Dan Collison, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll be waiting to see what happens. And guys, I want to thank you for joining us. And of course, I'm Kimberly Brooks, and I will see you tomorrow.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
Round one of the two debates for Democrats.